Hi all. One of the aspects of male and female relations and gender politics that I find most interesting is why it's taboo to talk about in the first place. How quickly things become emotionally tense by a single innocent sentence. While in my experience I've noticed women to be more emotional about discussions regarding sex relations, I have noticed that many men are also just as emotional. Although when men are between themselves with no women present, I have noticed a still tense but far more relaxed and open dialogue. Even still, shaming language may appear. Not surprisingly, the heterosexual guys who strongly define and or childishly boast their masculinity by sexual success are practically guaranteed to throw around shaming language. Some of these said men may act arrogantly against women, though still careful about what words they use and in what context, while others with similar notions of masculinity will always put women on a pedestal even when women aren't around. Interestingly enough, the strength in shaming language by these men largely relies on whether a guy is single and or sexless. If, however, the one being shamed has frequent sex, then suddenly those same opinions grudgingly matter, although those types of men may only really concede when women aren't present in that specific situation. If, however, women are present, then suddenly the opinions of a great many men remain silent or submissively change to concede to that of women. But why? Why should the attitude and opinions of men change when discussing something about sex relations among women, be it a wife, girlfriend, a woman of interest, acquaintance, or friend? To be sure, many reasons for this exist, such reasons like indifference and the dodging of irrational and emotional arguments by both men and women. Regarding the latter, I can to an extent understand that angle, because unfortunately some topics are simply off limits to some people because they're unable to have a civil dialogue about them. Fundamentally, however, I think this change in attitude and public opinion of men is largely credited to their desire to seek validation in women. On a shallow point of view, men will change their behavior at risk of shifting the general civility by saying something a woman may emotionally disagree with to avoid a breakup, argument, and or being sexless for a period of time. No doubt that while sex is naturally important to men, it has additionally become a means by which many men justify the masculinity of themselves and other men. Likewise, women too judge men by this notion of masculinity. Among varying depths within the topic itself, I have only discussed sex relations between people occasionally and in randomly occurring moments in my social life. Having said that, when it does happen, I find it curious how men and women behave, namely the awkwardness that it typically incites, particularly around men, and the exchange in facial expressions during moments of silence, a behavioral outcome I personally find hilarious. Between adults, it is as if we all know how ridiculous the current sexual dynamic is, but nevertheless, it's not something that should be discussed freely in the open. This is largely due to whenever regarding a topic such as this, many women get easily pissed, while again, men would rather not get women angry and thus lose female validation. It is as if the awkward men are facing a dilemma to speak out their minds or do whatever else is pleasing to women around them. Regardless of whether sentiments are legitimately right or wrong, regardless of their discontent in certain aspects, they would rather play on the silly rules in the game of dating and relationships. In fear of having their women leave, argue, or withhold sex from them as punishment, they nod their heads and bite their tongues because daring to have and express disagreements on a topic regarding sex relations is to these men too bold a move. Nevertheless, the reaction of women really determines how free the men feel they're capable of being. In the few moments I've experienced where women are calm and intellectually honest, then men feel more comfortable around those specific women to express opinions freely. All in all, however, I typically notice that women are really too self-interested to be intellectually honest about such discussions. Whether these women consciously or subconsciously behave this way, I think really applies on an individual basis, though I tend to think the former is more common. Specifically, the women who act consciously, typically the most emotionally aggressive, are very familiar with the game that is being played here and the influence in her power. These women often dislike these topics because they shed a light on their own behaviors that look less than admirable when analyzed, and since many women are very content with the special privileges they have in dating and relationships, they then would rather not lose what influences they have to maintain their way of life. Not surprisingly, these women will use shaming words of their own at men and even women. As a guy, it's common to be called a misogynist, chauvinist, sexless loser, homosexual, and to man up. Incidentally, the deliberately hurtful context in the use of homosexual and shaming language of this sort is really a slap in the face against gay men. Who knew that apparently disagreeing with a woman is synonymous with being gay? Damn you gay guys, why can't you be more like lesbians? They don't ever disagree with women.
You candy ass piece of
Can we all just get along? You want sausage or pepperoni?
Never mind then. Returning back on track, these women would rather their men not even think or discuss sex relations because they fear that men will wake up.
Keep the husbands in the dark. They're happier that way.
Besides waking up, it is specifically the act of resolving certain personal discontenting issues that a lot of women fear because the consequences of this introduce new relationship stipulations which do away with many female entitlements while certainly changing or ending any one-sided relationships. These women, often regardless of being feminist or not, see the biases themselves and out of their own selfishness and uncaring continue to facilitate an overall female-favored dynamic where men are considered varyingly contemptuous depending on how valuable they are, while also being required to walk on eggshells to keep women happy. In part, this is why I think these types of women are frequently hostile towards foreign women who, incidentally, uphold a more reciprocal relationship with men. The attitudes of these foreign women compromise the self-interest of typical Western women because many men are refreshingly surprised to find foreign women who are actually affable and who aren't obsessed with vanity. In response to this, many Western women will mockingly shame men and even go so far as to assert these women to be mindless and practically akin to children in mentality. Frankly, this type of behavior is incredibly arrogant and an ironic joke to say the least when you consider the vast immaturity of Western women. However, it needs to be said here that my mention of foreign women is to not incite this notion that these women are some kind of holy grail alternative because they're not, but rather to make the contrast between different women from different societies while shedding light on the vicious selfishness of Western women. I think if it wasn't for the majority of men defining their masculinity by female approval via sex, then such a game would produce a very different outcome, where women in the context of a relationship are valued more for their qualities than having their sexual output overshadow everything else. Conversely, with men being more critical of women, this may even tame women's hypergamous desires to instead seek better qualities in men too, keeping in mind that both men and women facilitate the current sexual dynamic from social inertia and comparative selfishness. Also, it's not to say that casual sex wouldn't exist with men defining their masculinity differently. Men and women will always lust for each other. In a relationship, however, women will have lost their whip to callously manipulate the behavior of typical men. Rather than using sexual manipulation, women will be forced to develop more substance and character in ways to draw attention from men who are interested in a serious reciprocal relationship. A better dynamic, I think, that will work in the long-term civility between the sexes, since as of now having women on a pedestal isn't really working too well. Yet this result shouldn't be shocking since adulating the worth of women or men will often incite egotistical behavior. Men need to finally wake up and grow out of this prepubescent notion of masculinity in seeking approval and self-worth by means of getting their dick wet when there is just so much more to life. Together with humanity's evolved consciousness and the awe-inspiring cosmos that we live in, it's just wasteful to define one's life akin to that of the respectively humble bacterium. Finding companionship is no doubt a worthy pursuit, but it is not a personal endeavor to trump all else. Throughout history, men of all varieties have achieved greatness, be they publicly known or not. It is about time that our legacy reflects what it is we do today.
It doesn't have to be like this.